What's up? This is a map 18 guide. I will primarily focus on the cut, but let's start at the beginning. As usual, I looked at the top 5 runs, hoping to see some interesting differences, and look at this. All players will have the motivation to avoid airtime at the end of the bobsleigh and set up to one side to reduce the angle of the ramp. But Hobbit picks another side and doesn't lose any significant amount of time in comparison to the others. Only Medicine 9268 and Kubas go for the wiggle here, and Kubas doesn't even gain anything on the current world record holder Glue Sniffer 1. Cool name by the way. Medicine stands out by doing this really well, and he gains roughly 0.05 seconds. Still, I will conclude that going for the wiggle is not worth it unless you are really good at the game, since getting such a good one is rather unlikely. The current record sets up with one left tap before the bobsleigh and then only presses forward until back on asphalt again. He does not even air brake. The next ice corner took me a while to get some consistency at. Ideally, we take a tight turn on the asphalt and initiate an ice slide. The line through this turn can vary a bit, but usually I full steer as I go over the crest and continue to hold right while in the air. This generally puts me almost in an ice slide before the transition. Now there is a small brake tap right before the slope to get the car to rotate, and then a short release somewhere in the middle section to avoid running over the edge too much and to help your car exit the slide. If you are a bit far right, you might want to wait with the rotation, and sometimes you don't even want to brake tap before the transition because you have enough angle without. Also, it's fine if you go over the edge a little in the middle of the corner. Now we need to set up rather steeply after the checkpoint. If you miss your exit, you can easily lose a second here by the way. The world record steers a bit carefully, and a right tap helps to cancel any small amount of sliding that is caused by icy tires. Now we cross over the crest as diagonally as possible and steer full left after. If you miss this timing, you will probably bonk. Just try to get a tight exit after the checkpoint and it will work out, sometimes. Now comes the cut. We drive the turn and jump onto the slope, aiming to land at or above the red cross on the ice. We need to aim at the small tree in front of the bigger tree to get a good setup to the other side. I found that a max speed above 300 when leaving the black asphalt is sufficient. The correct line is more important than getting above 310 speed like the top 5 do. Avoid setting up too steep because you will lose more speed on the slope and not make it far enough on the bounce. The angle you see on Medicine here is already a bit steep for slower speeds in my opinion. While on the slope we need to tap right once or twice to avoid jumping off with our car rotating to the left. Now we air brake to keep our car flat, and upon leaving the water after the first bounce we steer full right. You need to be rather aggressive with this so that your next bounce is almost at a 90-degree angle and happens before this line. After the second bounce we generally don't steer until we touch the ground. I found that being as backwards as possible really helps make this more consistent, and you can see that I have an almost 90-degree angle as I slide up the edge backwards. The good players often land at an angle much less backwards, but they all have their front left wheel already on the ground upon arriving. If they were just a bit short, their front wheel would bounce on the border and their runs would be lost. I really recommend going as backwards as possible because it lets you keep runs where you are a bit short. Now we just steer to the left, and then as soon as we are on the black asphalt, back to the right. If you are getting a good cut, you might have to release a little bit to get this. You will not slide out here because your front right tire is not icy. If all tires were icy, you wouldn't be allowed to full steer and you wouldn't make the turn. Ideally, we managed to keep third here, but even if you don't, you can still get a great run like Cabby. I would rank the difficulty of this cut as easier than the map 11 cut from winter 2020, but it is still quite hard. Also, be sure to practice the ending by finishing failed runs and taking the long way around the cut instead. Now air brake the next jump and drive the next turn. You want to take off at the vertical lines on the black asphalt while tapping left a bit to help your car land straight. We set up a bit to the right of the lines on the reactor and start initiating an ice slide. There are some different lines here, but the most popular one is to let the car get low and naturally carry itself back up the slope. Now comes a quick brake tap before the checkpoint to get a tighter turn, and we let the car run into the asphalt and set itself back straight. As Kubas shows, You don't have to take a tight turn here, but it is a bit slower. I think he loses roughly 0.2 on glue sniffer. Now we use the snow to set up the next ice slide. I found this one particularly hard. Look for this tree as early as possible and do whatever is necessary to pass it on the left. Some of the top 5 perform small brake taps to tighten the turn, but you really need to adjust your inputs depending on the entry, so this doesn't tell you much. Alright, that's all I got. Bye.